Thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. I'm just trying to get rid of this waiting room. Okay, great. So we are calling this Finance 101. This is the first of a series of empowerment workshops that Sanjeevani is hosting. And this is all about women and being financially empowered. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a lot of us may be enjoying dual income households. Some of us may be in single income ones. Some of us may be in no income, given the current COVID scenario and 30 million people unemployed. Well, it doesn't matter whichever scenario you're in, you would need to process all these changes that are happening around you. So the first thing I would always suggest is first think about how you can take care of yourself. Because if you cannot take care of yourself first, you can't take care of others. Whether it was a pay cut or job loss, take some time to, let it sink in, because it is an emotional moment and you have every right in the world to feel emotional about it. Please go easy on yourself. You don't have to figure out everything on day one. Take it step by step. So let's see that you've had a household pay cut. So if you went from dual to single or none, you've obviously witnessed a household pay cut. The first thing you want to do is don't make any long-term commitments. Keep everything on a window of maybe 6 months to a year. Look at your numbers, look at your bank accounts, look at your investments, look at your bills, understand your numbers, understand what is it that you have saved. If you are by yourself, make a list of the friends that you can count on or family members. That's basically what it means by update your beneficiaries. Try to find out what accounts your name is on. This is very applicable to people who are suddenly facing retirement or coming out from a divorce. You really want to know what single was joined. All in all, what we are really looking for is establishing your financial identity. You have a social identity, which may not change, but you really want to understand what's your financial identity. Try to have a major credit card in your name, have a bank account in your name. Anything that was joint, you want to make sure that you close out joint accounts and you have closed out any joint lines of credit which you may or may not have with your ex. Okay. So if you have any questions, please note it down and we'll come back to it. Okay. So the topic on top says make IRA your best friend. IRA is really acronym for Investment Retirement Account. And there are different types of IRAs, as you can see over here. There are about 6 or 7 broadly IRAs. So what is really an IRA? An IRA is something that you open at a financial institution like a bank or Fidelity or any of them, and anybody can open it. If your employer doesn't open a 401k, you can actually have one yourself. You don't need to be employed. You could even be an hourly worker, but you could have an IRA. The good thing about IRA is that, we can talk about it. There's a lot to talk about IRA, but very quickly, this is something that grows till the age of 59 and a half or 70 and a half, in the sense that you can't take out earnings before that. It grows tax deferred, which means you don't pay taxes on it till you take it out. So that's a great thing. And we can do the math later on. I have some cool notes if anybody has any questions. And there are different kinds of IRAs, depending on your income limit. Every year, what happens is if you contribute to an IRA, it gets deducted from the total income you make. So basically, you pay less income taxes. A spousal IRA, which I think a lot of you must be wondering what that is if you're not working, you can still have your working spouse who can contribute to an IRA for you. So this really makes a lot of sense, because some of us are home taking care of our family and taking care of our kids, and this makes a lot of sense. Okay. This is by far the most important slide. Even if you don't get anything else, I would really like you to get this, because if you've got this, you've got pretty much 50% of what we're talking about. And I know I'll be giving you a lot of information here. Sorry, I'm just get that over. So what is the 50-20-30 rule? The 50-20-30 rule is really how you want to do your savings. What this says is 50% of your monthly income goes towards living expenses, 20% goes towards savings, and 30% goes to your personal spending. It doesn't matter whether you're making 10 bucks an hour or whether you're making 100 bucks an hour. This is really the template or the formula that you want to live your life with. This is something that is used even by financial planners. It is a suggested metric, and this is what will hold you in good stead going forward. So if you're looking for a house to rent, let's say your monthly income is $1,200 a month, you definitely don't want to go above 600. That's how it breaks down. So what are these red flags, less than 40, less than 50? What this means is if you're approaching 40, you're approaching 50, there are a couple of red flags that you want to look out for. One is that, can you pay off your credit card at the end of each month? Because credit card companies charge a lot of money on interest. So if you cannot pay off your credit card at the end of each month, that's a red flag for you. And we definitely don't want any red flags. Are you the only income earner? Of course, in certain situations you may be, but then that also tells you that you need to be careful about how you spend your money and how you plan your 50-30-20, right? Is your credit score below 700? How do you find out your credit score for free? So we have a website here called Credit Sesame. It allows you to check it for free. So what can you do to improve your credit score? We'll talk about it in future webinars. But right now, anything below 700 is not a good idea, especially if you're looking to get rent, get a new car, you know, even buy a house. You want to be above 700. What about if you've had the same car insurance? Well, you need to talk about better car insurance. And what if you have no retirement plan? You definitely want to start a retirement plan. So these are some very basic red flags that you want to kind of look at in your financial profile. And it's the sooner you start, the better. Of course, I didn't put 2030 because at 2030, nobody wants to talk about finance, right? So, okay. So very quickly, we do have a lot of people who are competent in handling money. Let's talk about the first one. You might have heard a lot about financial advisors. And who are these people? What do they do? So financial advisor who is typically somebody who will take care of your finances in the terms of they will do financial planning. They will help you decide like everything we spoke about earlier, IRA, and stuff like that. You plan your retirement and all that stuff. So they are more like a doctor who will take care of your financial health. Financial advisors do cost a lot of money, definitely. They are not cheap. And that is one of the reasons why now we have robo-advisors. Robo-advisors are basically websites which they manage upwards of $1 billion. And we will share a few names with you. The robo-advisors are, you put in, let's say 50 bucks a month, and it will allocate it based on your risk profile across whatever you've chosen. So you could have chosen funds, ETFs, and we'll talk more about that. And that basically they manage their money for you. So if you don't know much about finance, but you still want to go with companies whose business is finance and they are living and breathing it, I would suggest work with robo-advisors. So they don't require much human interaction, and they also are tax optimized, so it really helps. Financial advisor is definitely suggested if you're going for a big life change, such as getting married, divorced, buying a house, taking care of aging parents, starting a business, because it helps you deal with these complexities. However, financial advisors typically have minimum investment requirements, and those could be upwards of $250,000 or more. So that unfortunately is the caveat with a financial advisor, which is why again robo-advisors have come into the picture. But if you are old fashioned like me and you like to talk to people and understand things, then maybe this is something that might work for you, because they will meet you in person. This is the easy part. A lot of you might have already know about this. What is a checking account, a savings account? I think everybody has a bank account, and so we know that. However, some of us don't know what is a money market account. A money market account or a certificate of deposit. The certificate of deposit is very simple. It keeps your money locked in. It's federally insured. So tomorrow if the bank were to crash, and we have seen that. So most of us are from India. We might have heard about the Axis Bank and HDFC Bank issues. There was a time about exactly 4 weeks ago where the Reserve Bank of India had to come in and guarantee, otherwise people were going to lose all their lifetime savings because these banks were going down under. So they did a bailout program. Similarly, federally insured savings account. Most of the banks in America, luckily, are federally insured up to $1 million, which means if you have about $1 million, you'll make your money is at least safe. But guess what? They don't really pay. I mean, 0.25% or 1% max, that's nothing. I mean, if you all know what inflation is, it is the cost of using that same $1 that you have today 2 years later, right? That $1 today is going to give you 2 donuts. Tomorrow it might give you 1. And if you keep your money in a CD, it's not going to even give you that 1 donut 2 years from now. So that's why you always need to look for something that gives you a higher interest rate. Some people like money market accounts because it's slightly better than your checking account and saving account. Plus you have the ability to write checks. But guess what? Like I said, 1.5% interest rate, you'd earn about 150. So it's good if you want to keep some liquidity, because you might have an urgent need for funds. I would always suggest a money market account. As women, we are very risk averse. I think it comes in our DNA, but I would definitely suggest this is the best way to go, which doesn't mean that you put all your eggs in one basket. No, you can mix and match all of this, but definitely you should have an investment account where you buy stocks, because that's the only thing in the last 100 years. And there have been a lot of Nobel Prizes given to people who have stated this theory and proved it, that the only way to make money in the long term is through stocks. So buying diligently, being an educated investor, that's really how you can grow your portfolio. Okay, this is a big one. May or may not be applicable to the entire audience, but nevertheless, we would like to speak about it. This is a sample checklist that a lawyer would hand out to you who charges $400 an hour. And this is huge. And this is something that we really want anyone whose life situation is changing to think about, even before you go to a lawyer. It basically tells you what your assets are, how much will it cost you to raise your children, not just cost, but even direct and indirect costs, and everything else to carry your life. This really gives you the big picture of how your life is going to be, how your children are going to be once this situation happens. And having this prepared before you meet your lawyer will save you a ton of money and headache. And also it will help you find the right lawyer. For example, I have encountered with some of my friends where somebody had $200,000. The lawyer didn't want to take her case. And somebody's assets were $5 million. And there were 5 lawyers who were ready to take her case. Because the settlement fees can be so huge, they're in it for the money too. So making this ahead of time and not thinking that your lawyer is your doctor really helps. And we can share more of this after the call is over. So very quickly, what are the low risk investments in 2020? We talked about savings accounts, certificates of deposits, money market funds. There are also other things like bonds, treasury bills, which are kind of very low risk, but obviously with low risk comes low interest rate, but they can move from 0.25 to even 2%. And there are other investment types like stock funds and REITs. REITs is real estate investment funds. If you don't want to invest in real estate, but you still want the benefit of real estate, you can have a REIT fund. You can also invest in rental housing. You can invest in index funds, municipal funds. So there's just so many different types. And we will be talking about this in all our upcoming webinars. So what kind of professionals do you want to work with when you need financial advice? Most importantly, as you know, anyone who works in this country, we all have to pay taxes. So most definitely you will need an accountant because you need someone to prepare and file your tax return. Unless of course you use TurboTax, which is also user friendly. But if you're a first time person doing it and you think you have a complicated financial picture, going to an accountant or CPA will really help. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, set up a new business, prepare a will, going through a divorce settlement, you definitely need an attorney. And then as we talked about financial planner, you need somebody who will help you pay off your debt, save for college. Fidelity is the largest financial house, one of the largest other than Vanguard, and they have a lot of financial planners. Then who is an investment advisor? So the difference between a financial planner and an investment advisor is that an investment advisor doesn't give you advice about taxes or estate planning like maybe this guy and this guy will do. But he has a very specific job. They help you choose the right investments for your life. So as of now, let's say the next 4 to 5 years, they not only help you choose, they also manage it. So because all the needs were not being met by financial planners, a different line of specialization came on where people would just go to investment advisors. So you have that choice too. So opening it up for question and answer, let me know what your questions are. And I hope I didn't speak too fast, but I'm happy to answer any questions at this point.
Hey, Sharmi, this is Bindu. I have a couple of questions actually.
Sure, go for it.
Do you also want to mention in the IRA about like Roth IRA as well?
Yeah, definitely. Did I not mention the Roth IRA in the slide?
I'm not sure if it was there in the slide or not. Do you want to maybe just explain a little bit with the difference between the regular IRA and Roth IRA? And so that's one. The other questions I had was, you know, on the slide where it says about red flags, right?
Yeah.
I didn't understand the statement about, you know, when you said, the thing that was mentioned in that if you have the same car insurance for a while, what does that mean?
Sure. Can I tackle them one by one?
Yes, thank you.
So there are basically there are a lot of differences between traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. The common factor, to keep it simple, is both Roth and traditional IRAs, they offer tax-free growth, which means that once the money is in the account, there are no taxes levied on the dividends or capital gains that the investments earn. So let's say both your Roth IRA and traditional IRA holds Apple stock, for example, right? We all love Apple, we have their phones. Now Apple has given you great dividends and Apple has appreciated in that IRA, right? Like if you bought it at $1,000, 5 years down the line, it's $5,000. So guess what? On that gain that you've had or the dividend that you've received, there will be no taxes levied. The difference is Roth IRA contributions are made with your post-tax dollars. So after whatever income you earn, if you're investing in a Roth IRA, it will come after you've paid the federal and state taxes. The tax is computed. Whereas in a traditional IRA, they are made with pre-tax dollars. It's almost like a 401k. First, the money is deducted, put into the IRA, then your tax is calculated. So that's pretty much the big difference between Roth IRA and traditional IRA.
So should we be putting in combination, or is there one preferred over the other, or is it just?
It depends on what your total income, household income is, and what the deductions, what the limits are for the year. I believe for 2020 it is $6,000 if your household income is 75 or less. And if your household income, I think, is above 120, then you don't get any deductions for either of the IRAs. So I think it maxes off around 100 or 120. But again, I'm not a CPA, so don't quote me on this. Definitely look it up. But that's pretty much, it's your household income and what is the financial bracket for that year is what should make you decide whether you want to go for a Roth IRA or for a traditional IRA. In my experience, it is a good idea to go for both, because both are offering you tax-free growth, but one is giving you the benefit with pre-tax, one is giving you the benefit with after-tax. So if your income is swinging in the course of 15 to 30 years, you kind of are able to still go up the ladder. Make sense?
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. And your second question was on red flags, right?
Yeah, the car insurance, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question. So car insurance in this country is a lot like gas prices. You know how the gas prices keep changing every day? No, they don't change every day. But what I'm trying to say is that they are dynamic. So what this means is that you, based on your driver's record. So like, for example, I'm an Illinois safe driver. What this means is for 10 years, I did not have any traffic violations and I did not have any speeding tickets. And so they gave me an Illinois safe driver. So what this means is that when I go shopping for my car insurance, anytime after that period of 10 years, again, I'm just giving you an example. You don't have to be an Illinois safe driver to go shop for car insurance. Every time you buy a car, you should change your insurance, because every car has a different insurance plan or a safety rating associated with it. So the algorithm, the way it runs is that your driver statistics to the car statistics. So for example, I used to drive a Honda CRV before, which is the most economical car supposedly in America. And I was paying $7 a month for car insurance, being an Illinois safe driver. Guess what? I did something really stupid. I bought a German car now. And Audi, even though it is one of the highest rated cars, but my insurance just went up double, which is 120 is what I pay right now. So what I mean is, unless you go shop for car insurance every now and then, you're not able to lever the fact that you've been a good driver. You know what I'm saying? Unless you've, of course, had a very bad record and something, and then probably it makes sense to stay with State Farm for the rest of your life. That's a different thing. But most of us over a period of time, we've maintained a good record. So why not use that record to shop for car insurance? Because every $10 that you save in a month, and if you've been here for, let's say, 10 years, that's like $1,200 coming back to you. Make sense?
So you're saying that after a few years, shop for car insurance, because that might give you some benefit.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So they have, like, for example, I have State Farm for my home. I have State Farm for my car. I have State Farm for actually both the cars. My daughter's going to start driving next year. So I'm going to go with State Farm because they give me the family discount. So I write family discounts.
Right.
Even Cook County started something else with State Farm now. For being in Cook County all this time, they give you some Cook County discount. So why not get it?
Okay.
This is Malani. I have a question.
Sure.
If my spouse is not working and I deposit money in spousal IRA, would that be deducted from my income?
Yes, absolutely. So that's the whole thing of a spousal IRA, which basically means you can contribute towards a non-working spouse. And the money that you contribute gets deducted. So when you file your taxes April 15th every year, the amount of money that you put in your spousal IRA, let's say the total limit is $6,000 and you put in maybe $3,000 for the year. So the total $3,000 would get deducted from your adjusted gross income. They call it AGI, or adjusted gross income for the year. If your adjusted gross income for the year was, let's say, $50,000, now your adjusted gross income would be $44,000. So you pay taxes on 44 instead of 50.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sharmishta. This is Mangala.
Hi, Mangala.
Hi. We talked in length the other day, but
yes.
During this session, a couple of things. When you were explaining that there are two types of people, one is your financial advisor. And you kind of talked about that.
Yeah.
Choose the right investments for you. What is the other? Like, what was the second one?
Oh, sure. So we talked about, let me see if I can share my screen with you.
Advisor and financial advisor.
You probably missed this one. The other one was investment advisor.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to know the difference between
Yeah, and what's the role of that person?
So, Auntie, what happens is, like, you know, you go to a doctor if you have a cold cough, right? That's your general practitioner. So imagine the financial planner being the general practitioner of finance.
Okay.
Now your GP tells you that, hey, you know what, I think you need to, your heartbeat is a little high. I think you to consult a heart specialist. So what would you do? You would go to a cardiologist, right? The investment advisor is like a cardiologist.
Okay.
So he gives you very, very specific need. So let's say you want to invest in rental housing. Okay. So he will talk to you about rental investment trusts or REITs. And he will tell you that, okay, ma'am, you can invest in REITs. This is what you can expect 4 years down the line, 5 years. So he is more like a specialized financial planner.
Okay. And my second question was regarding the IRA and Roth IRA.
Yeah.
For senior citizens who are not working anymore and are earning Social Security and living on that, how does this IRA and Roth IRA work for them?
I will have to I will have to make an educated research on that and get back to you, because like I said, I am not a tax accountant, so I don't want to put any, I don't want to make any guesstimates here. So I have written that as a question, and I will send a reply to Pramila, and we'll make sure that we get back to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sharmi, this is Shatabdi. I have a question and clarification.
Sure.
So for the IRA, so when we withdraw the money, that time we pay tax if it is not Roth IRA, and is there like a age limit after that we do not have to pay the tax?
Unfortunately, okay, I'll answer the second part first. You always have to pay tax. The day you die. So from the time you're born till the day you die, whenever you take out a distribution or an income, you have to pay taxes on it. It's just a question, do you pay it now or do you pay it later? So I think the second part of your question is, when you take it out, do you have to pay tax?
Okay.
Depending on whether it's a traditional or a Roth, you would have to pay tax. What was your other question?
But for the Roth, it's already taxed $1. Right? Isn't it Roth?
That's what I said. The difference between the traditional and the Roth is they are tax deferred. But in case of the Roth, it is post-tax dollar. In the traditional, it is pre-tax dollar. So that's why the difference on whether you will pay tax or not, depending on which one you take. But I think your first question was at what age? The age 70 and a half. You can start taking it from 59 and a half, but if you choose to leave it there, you can start taking it from 17 and a half.
Okay, okay.
But if you take it before 59 and a half, you're imposed a super duper penalty. So I think you got to wait a significant amount of years.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sharmi, I have a question. A lot of, because of COVID, a lot of people, they have lost their jobs or in furlough. And so do you have any specific kind of advice that you would like to share that, what can people do to curtail, minimum loss and, maximum savings? What are your tips for that?
So that's a very good point. Thanks, Romila. So I think the current statistics are that about 30 million people are filing for unemployment, which is huge. So let's look at the positives first. The good thing is you should get unemployment benefits if you have lost your job. No questions asked, as I understand. A lot of you, depending on your income, would have already received the checks in your bank account. The $1,000 plus the 500 for each child, depending on your income. Moving forward, what are some things you can do? So I know personally Wells Fargo, if you have a mortgage on your house, Wells Fargo and some other banks are offering what is called a forbearance for your mortgage payments, which basically means that if you are paying, let's say $1,000 a month towards your mortgage payment, you don't have to pay it now. And you're not going to accrue any interest right now. So there is no penalty. So that is a huge thing in terms of your cash flow, because right now your income has stopped, your cash flow, you're strapped for funds, and you know that wherever you're living right now, if it's your own house, you have to make those payments. Otherwise, your credit score is going to get down. So definitely speak to your bank and see if they can offer you that forbearance, because that will really help you in keeping that. Right now, I think they're starting with the basic 3 months and then they're moving it. But let me tell you, not all banks are doing it. The first preference is for senior citizens, and then it is for the rest. So that's one thing. The second thing is a lot of banks and credit card companies are also offering forbearance on credit card debt. And more recently, I found out Comcast is also offering forbearance on bills. So make sure that you have water, you have electricity, you have gas, and if you're unable to meet your utilities, speak to them for extended payment plans and forbearance plans. This is all at no interest. Definitely try to go to like a Discover card or a Capital One card, which offers a 0 interest rate. So if you have a lot of credit card debt, try to move it there, because they're giving you very attractive things. Or else, even better, sign up for a United Airlines card and you're getting like 10,000 miles right then and there, because airlines are bleeding right now, right? They're doing anything to get people. So this is a great time to save money on that ticket to India, you know. So yeah, so shoot us your questions. We'll be happy. I know there's a lot of information to take at one time, but we can come back with links and more answers if you post us on the Facebook page.
Sharmi, there's one more question which has come in through email.
Sure.
You had a slide on, what if someone is going through a life change, for example, divorce, separation, or if a spouse has passed away. In general, you had shared a list of tips and tricks. Is there any kind of a general advice you would like to give to someone who's planning to separate or is, in the process of a divorce? Because that means a 2 income becomes a single income. What is your general guidance for those, for those men or women?
Yes. No, that's a very valid question. So the divorce checklist that I shared in the presentation is really a more tactical drill down checklist to understand your financial health. But before we even get there, if you're planning to separate or you have faced a life-changing situation, the first thing you really want to do is stop blaming. Stop blaming everyone around you and take responsibility. More often than not, what we experience is we start saying, he did this, he did that, I didn't get this, I didn't get that. Well, get out of it. It's your life. You got to take those decisions and you got to stop expecting. So take a hold, and unless you're in that mindset of being able to take a grasp of what you need to do, be able to complete that checklist. So it is really important that you're able to assimilate what happened. Somebody seems to be.
I think someone is, speaker is on. May I request that if you can mute it, please? Thank you so much.
Okay. So thank you, Pramila. So basically what I would say is let it sink in that it's you who is in control and you are holding the steering wheel, and let that consciousness be able to drive you to an objective decision making, because that objectivity is really required before you meet the lawyer, before you meet the attorney, and before you do your financial assessment. So having that clarity and objectivity, I know it is very, very difficult. It is very challenging, but it has to be there. Otherwise, you're going to just be engaged in a lifelong, he did this, she did this situation that's not really going to yield the best results for anyone. And not just life-changing situation. I mean, I have that with my working spouse all the time when I want to go route A and he wants to go route B and there is no middle path. So I have bridges by going route A. He has burned bridges by going route B. So I think it's really, I think that's what empowerment is all about. We should really be able to take these decisions by ourselves and make education a priority in educating ourselves as much as possible towards those decisions. And it's absolutely fine if you make mistakes. It's absolutely fine, because if you don't make mistakes, you're not learning from it. So to answer your question, I'm sorry I went on a long drawl, but I think the long and short of it is really to be mindful and to be having that collective consciousness to think objectively.
Thank you so much, Sharmi.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from anyone else? And say, supposing there's you know, a one-on-one needed by anyone, you can certainly have that session with Sharmi, our guest speaker. You just need to send an email to info@sanjeevaniforyou.com, and she will set up that time and answer any other specific questions you may have. The series continues every month. The first Sunday from 3 to 4, there are a variety of topics. And I believe to all of us, you know, we all, there's some kind of an empowerment needed, as Sharmi mentioned, because, you know, life stages, you know, will have consequences. So we will share all of that. We will also be sharing the recording and the answers to some of the questions asked in this session. But nonetheless, we want to thank you all for spending your Sunday afternoon with us, and thanks much, Sharmi, our guest speaker, for sharing valuable insights.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Sharmi. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Sharmi.
Sharmi.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharmi.